Exposed, the amazing journey of a bargain hunter who surprisingly hid 12 million, transforming the life of a single mom in Maplewood. Sarah's hands shook as she scanned another item across the register, forcing a smile through her exhaustion. With each beep, she struggled to keep her head above water. The weight of bills stacked like bricks in a tower of anxiety haunted her regularly. Just yesterday, she had counted pennies for Jake's favorite snack and felt the heavy guilt of a mother who couldn't provide. The local grocery store felt like a prison, sometimes her paycheck a constant reminder of what wasn't enough. Every Saturday, the thrill of bargain hunting lured Sarah into a world where chaos melted away. Thrift stores and garage sales became her holy sanctuary, a treasure map of the past she sought in the midst of her everyday grind. Hidden gems and forgotten valuables echoed remnants of nostalgia. She relished finding others' trash transform into her modest. Yet what would they think if they unearthed the secret beneath her modest exterior? Then came the phone call. Mr. Thompson, the elderly neighbor with a penchant for antiques, offered her more than advice. He became the mirror reflecting potential she had long buried under skepticism. In his warm, wizened way, he recounted stories that made Sarah question if she was really just a struggling cashier or potentially part of something greater. He indulged her curiosity with delightful nostalgia, regaling tales of family legacies she had eyed with disbelief. The irony stung. She was sitting on untold riches while grappling with the consequences of survival. Caught in a web of pride and financial stress, Sarah's thoughts spiraled. Admitting need felt like defeat, a betrayal to the values her parents instilled fiercely in her. How could she reconcile her desperate need with the morality of asking for help? The thought churned deeper into her gut as she battled with images of what her community would think. They knew her as the bargain hunter, the honest single mom. Would they judge her for stepping into a realm of power she never dreamed possible? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Days passed, and Sarah felt the pressure mount as a corporation declared its interest in her father's estate. The looming threat sent shivers of uncertainty down her spine. The fight between loyalty to her roots and the desire to secure Jake's future became an internal battleground. Did saving their legacy mean staying in the shadows of scarcity, or could she step forward into her father's spotlight? As the auction day approached, uncertainty gnawed at her relentlessly, and ache in her chest grew unbearable. Questions swirled like autumn leaves in a whirlpool of confusion. Each potential bid echoed her father's voice, urging her to consider the stark contrast between her past and a brighter future. Yet, underneath that quiet surface danced a fear more potent than the fear of financial insecurity, the fear that this choice would define her not just as a mother, but a woman forever changed, either exposed to envy and judgment or hidden beneath humility and regret. Upon entering the auction hall, surrounded by murmurs and evaluative glances, Sarah felt as if the shadows of her father's antiquities loomed over her, demanding recognition. The auctioneer raised his gavel, and time suspended. Her choice hung heavy in the air, vibrating with potential and peril. Would she embrace the fortune, or retreat into the safety of her past? The moment felt like the crest before the wave, and Sarah stood teetering on the edge, a woman ready to battle her inheritance or shield herself from its truths. The gavel fell, a decisive crack that echoed through the crowded hall, jolting Sarah from her fog of indecision. She felt the weight of every gaze, the curiosity, the expectation coiling around her like a snare. Each face held stories of their own, yet here she was, front and center, at the precipice of a transformation she had never anticipated. As the first item, a Victorian writing desk with intricate carvings, was presented, memory surged. Evenings spent in her father's study, surrounded by remnants of words unwritten and dreams fulfilled. The desk was a portal, whispering the tales of her ancestors, Yet embedded within it was the question that twisted her stomach. Would she honor this legacy or watch it fade into oblivion while she continued to struggle? No more hiding, she whispered under her breath, a pledge not just to herself, but to the memory of her father. But as the auctioneer's voice rose, so did the deafening weight of her fears. What if stepping forward meant exposing her weaknesses, unraveling the mother she had fought so hard to maintain? With each bid, adrenaline coursed through her veins. It wasn't merely about the items on that stage, it was about a reckoning. Every bid felt like a battle against a part of her that wanted to retreat and stay safe within her current role, marooned in mediocrity. But another part, a burgeoning sense of determination, started to rise, fueled by the conversations with Mr. Thompson, who had seen worth in her where she had seen none. As the auction progressed, she found herself drawn toward more than just the items. She felt an unusual bond with the auctioneer, a man who exuded confidence and control. He was skilled, deftly maneuvering the room, his words painting vivid pictures of each piece's history. Sarah could sense the energy shift with every bid, and in that moment, she realized she wanted not just to participate but to engage. The idea seeped deeper into her thoughts. What if she had the potential to wield this power, to navigate a world she thought was forever closed to her? The next item, a French porcelain vase, was brought forward. Something within her stirred, a kernel of ambition forgotten long ago. The price climbed rapidly, and she felt the soft tug of her heart as she pictured what that vase could mean. A symbol, she thought. A symbol of not just possession, but of taking ownership of her lineage. Gingerly, she raised her paddle. The movement felt seismic, like a shift in the tectonic plates of her life. The startled gazes trained on her only amplified her pulse. But this was her moment, a moment to reclaim herself, her identity. It was no longer just about Jake or the bills or the whispers of the school gate. In that instant, it was about her. 2.as The auctioneer acknowledged her bid. A solitary clap rang out before the others joined, a hesitant wave of approval washing over her. The realization struck her she was no longer just an observer in her life. She was an active participant, ushering herself into uncharted territory. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The tension in the room shifted as her potential failures danced before her. The fear of drawing attention to herself collided with the thrill of possibility. As the auction continued, she debated her next move. She could feel her heart racing, not just from the adrenaline, but from a budding resolve to confront the chains of expectation. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Thompson across the hall. His approving nod anchored her, grounding her in the knowledge that seeking help or claiming her space was not a sign of weakness, but an assertion of her right to thrive. A resolve began to crystallize within her, a resolve to embrace her inheritance, palpable and tangible. But just as victory felt within her grasp, a voice cut through the hum, a challenge in the air. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," said a sharply dressed man who had entered late, his gaze disapproving. The tension shifted and Sarah's heart raced, unsure if the man was an adversary or just an arrogant bidder. Sensing that this encounter would define her next steps, would this be a confrontation she would fear or one she could face head-on? The moment had deepened with newfound urgency, and Sarah stood at the threshold of confrontation, each heartbeat echoing the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Would she rise to the occasion, or retreat back into the safety of the familiar? The stakes were set, and the next chapter of her journey was about to unfold. Each second stretched like an eternity as Sarah evaluated the figure before her, the well-dressed man radiating disdain. He was like a polished stone, cold and unyielding, an immediate threat to the fragile confidence she had just begun to nurture. His words dripped with condescension, and they clawed at her insides, making her question the path she was about to forge. The room settled into an anticipatory hush. She could feel dozens of eyes evaluating her reaction. This moment was unlike any she had faced. A flicker of doubt threatened to extinguish her vibrant resolve, yet another part of her flared defiantly. Who was he to dictate her choices? She had spent years hiding under the weight of expectations, but here, in this crucible, she sensed her power beginning to crystallize. "I'd be willing to take that risk," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The words surprised even her, emerging with a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Within the span of that exchange, the emotional stakes rose, her internal dialogue spiraling from fear to ambition. The man arched an eyebrow, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, charging the air with a palpable tension. "You think you're ready to own that?" His challenge felt personal, as if he were not just critiquing her bidding skills, but targeting her entire existence, the insecurities she had buried beneath the roles of daily life. But then she thought of her father, of the dreams he'd instilled in her. This was not just about the vase or the desk, it was about reclaiming the vibrancy that life had so readily stripped from her. This was her inheritance, one she would learn to navigate regardless of external judgments. Raising her paddle once more, she found her footing. This was no mere auction, it was a path towards her own validation. The auctioneer's gaze acknowledged her resilience, an approving glimmer flashing in his eyes. Whatever intentions were behind the sharply dressed man's words, she understood now that she could write a different narrative, a story where she no longer cowered beneath criticism. "Let us see what you've got," the auctioneer prompted, his tone filled with the thrill of competition, and Sarah felt a surge of electricity. The bids started to rise, and she let herself get lost in the process, each increment a step closer to self-assertion. It felt exhilarating, almost addictive. As the room buzzed with excitement, data points of previous biddings flared in her mind. She began to calculate not just what the value of the porcelain vase could be, but what it signified: conquest over fears, the emergence of her identity from the depths of stifling expectations. The thrill of contest invigorated her, a new facet of her personality awakening with each bid she made. Yet just then, that reedy voice of doubt whispered once more, what if she didn't know enough? What if the stakes proved too high? As she raised her paddle again, doubt clawed at the edges of her resolve. 1800, she announced, locking eyes with the auctioneer, her breath steadying as she held her ground against the crowd's murmurs. 1800, going once, he called, pausing. It felt surreal, as if she were holding her breath, inching toward an unknown destination where her narrative could shift entirely. Suddenly the sharply dressed man countered. 2000, he declared, his expression smug, as if success were guaranteed for him. Sarah inhaled sharply, the fear of failure swirling inside like a relentless tide. Yet the desire to transcend the shadows of her old life swelled stronger. Her mind raced. She conjured images of herself relinquishing the fears that had long held her captive. 2500. She proclaimed louder than intended, the words bursting forth an act of defiance that resonated through her core. But then the strangeness of the moment hit her. This wasn't merely about the vase or the monetary implications. It pressed deeper, a challenge to every choice she had suffocated under. The world was watching, and she could feel their curiosity transforming into something more, a collective energy that seemed to demand her authenticity. As the auctioneer paused to gauge the reactions swirling within the crowd, she realized this was no longer just a bid in a room filled with people. It was a serious declaration of intent, a confrontation with everything she had hidden from. Silence enveloped the hall as she glanced once more at the man. He folded his arms, his expression more annoyed than anything else. This would not just determine the outcome of a porcelain piece, it would shape her identity, thrusting her closer toward a woman who owned her choices, unapologetically seizing her rightful space. The gavel punctuated the air again, a sound echoing in her mind. The adrenaline coursing through her veins mingled with uncertainty, and in that moment, she stood on the precipice of a decision that would ripple through the very fabric of her life. Would she push forward, unflinching, or let the voice of doubt drown her out one more time? As the bidding continued, her heart raced with possibilities, and in that critical moment, Sarah knew she had to embrace this transition and challenge every limitation she had accepted. The stakes were monumental, but so were the rewards. What awaited her beyond this threshold? The upcoming item on the block, an antique mirror, might just reflect more than her exterior. Would she dare to look inside? The antique mirror gleamed under the stage lights, its frame intricately detailed, promising not just a reflection but an invitation to introspection. As Sarah's gaze locked onto it, a cascade of feelings surged within her. At that moment, the mirror felt like a metaphor for her life, what lay beneath the surface, the fractured pieces ready to be reassembled into something whole. Her heart pounded as the auctioneer outlined the history of the piece, a relic from a forgotten era. A silent witness to countless lives, just like Sarah had been to her own. The irony didn't escape her. She had been living in the shadows of others for far too long. This mirror, with its worn glass, had seen the passage of time and transformation. If it could bear the weight of its past, why couldn't she carry her own? The bidding began, and with each increment, she felt a visceral pull between desire and doubt. This wasn't just about acquiring a piece of art, it was about reclaiming her story. Yet the voice of reason nagged at her, asking if the price would outweigh the emotional toll. What if it brings more sorrow than joy? It questioned harshly. No more, she whispered under her breath, already asserting her resolution. A delicate balance hovered within her, a spectrum where fear loomed on one end and burgeoning confidence gripped the other. The past hadn't defined her, and this was her opportunity to craft a narrative of her own choosing. 500. A competitor, an older woman in a tailored suit, had jumped ahead, her voice slicing through the air with conviction. It sparked a fire in Sarah's chest. 600. Her own voice rang clear, surprising everyone, including herself. The auctioneer smiled knowingly, relishing the tension between the bidders. As Sarah's paddle went up, the initial thrill of the challenge morphed into something deeper. Each moment spent in this pulsating environment ripped away layers of the persona she'd worn as armor. With the next round, the woman upped the ante, raising the bid to 700. A pulse of unease coursed through Sarah, but this time, it felt different. It felt fueled by a weapon she hadn't known. She wielded the desire to claim ownership of her journey. 800. She declared, surprising herself with the strength in her conviction. Nothing about this felt unearned. This was a reflection of her tenacity. In that instant, what had once felt like an insurmountable obstacle seemed conquerable. The room shifted as murmurs of surprise echoed softly, and Sarah felt lightheaded with the realization. There was power in her audacity. The mirror became a symbol of what was possible if she dared to push against the confines. The woman hesitated, her smug demeanor faltering. 900. She spat, tempering her voice with a forced composure. 1000. Sarah replied impulsively, the words crisp and sharp, a declaration that carved a space for her existence in this arena. The act was electric, an unshakable commitment to herself and her newfound clarity. With each bid, she unwrapped layers of the past. Each number held the weight of her hesitation, her fears, and her undeniable strength. She was no longer just a passive observer in her own life. She was weaving her narrative. The auctioneer's gavel, poised between decisions, took on a new significance. As the two continued to spar over the mirror, Sarah realized she was not only contending against her opponent, but against every subtle adversary residing in her mind. This battle was no longer confined to the auction room. The mirror she fought for stood as the bridge between the woman she was and the woman she aspired to be. But just as the auctioneer began to gather enthusiasm, the gavel rising for what felt inevitable, a thought crashed into her fervor. The mirror was not just a piece of art, but a reminder of her transformations, a reflection of her imperfections and successes alike. Would she confront the reflection it offered or retreat from the revelations it promised? This decision teetered on the brink of metamorphosis. As she raised her paddle again, a decisive breath coursed through her as she prepared to take the plunge. The world had shifted, and she was in the eye of a storm of binary choices: claim victory or concede to doubt. What awaited her if she won? Would it finally be enough, or would that mirror reveal something even more daunting? Uncertainty swirled, a whirlpool of anticipation coiling within her. Her heart thudded as she locked eyes with the auctioneer, dreading yet yearning for the pivotal moment. She was ready to rewrite her narrative one bid at a time. 1100. She called, as the world around her faded into the background. time itself holding its breath. Would the mirror reflect a future she had only dared to dream of? The room fell into a hushed silence, each bitter frozen in anticipation. As the echoes of Sarah's declaration faded, a surge of exhilaration coursed through her, igniting dormant ambitions. This enigmatic mirror was becoming less about vanity and more about empowerment, a chance to look deeper within the soul and face her truths head-on. Is anyone going to challenge that? The auctioneer called, his voice punctuating the air like a halting heartbeat. The older woman, her confidence now visibly shaken, shot Sarah a glance filled with incredulity. It was a brief moment, yet it felt like an eternity for Sarah, a spotlight on her desire to break free from the chains of others' expectations. 1100 going once, going twice, the auctioneer's cadence wove between anticipation and trepidation. In that moment, Sarah questioned everything she thought she'd known. The exhilaration brushed against doubt's edge. Was this impulsiveness or an awakening? And then it happened. The gavel fell with a resounding thud. Sold. The word resonated through her. The realization that she had won the mirror sank in her heart raced, not just from victory, but from what it symbolized. This was her first personal proclamation against complacency, but with that thrill came a sudden wave of anxiety. What awaited her beyond the surface of the mirror? Would it reveal the scars and struggles she had buried? She had fought hard. Was she truly prepared to face the truth of her own reflection? As she approached the podium to finalize the transaction, each step felt magnified, reverberating through her body. The mirror, draped in fabric, lay waiting, cloaked in mystery. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as they brushed against its edge, the coolness against her skin grounding her in the reality of the moment. In that intimate contact, a flicker of realization blossomed within her. The mirror wasn't merely a transaction. It was an emblem of her journey, a tangible piece of the narrative she had been crafting. Each layer, each splinter of wood, held stories that connected to her own history entwined with the future she sought to create. She turned toward the doorway, her newfound treasure carefully cradled in her arms. The sudden shift in weight was both a physical and metaphorical burden, and a surge of clarity hit her. Every story had shadows worth dragging into the light. Sarah had bid against not just another person, but her own fear of inadequacy, the fear that had kept her confined to the sidelines of her life. As she stepped outside into the glow of the streetlights, the cool night air was invigorating, an awakening. With the mirror nestled against her chest, the world around her felt expansive. What started as a single bid had transformed into a confrontation with her past, a commitment to embracing her journey unapologetically. But even as she turned to leave, a familiar face in the crowd caught her eye, an acquaintance from her previous life who had long been a silent critic of her ambitions. He approached her with an air of superiority, a knowing smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "Did you really think you could win that and change your life?" he jeered, scanning her prize with condescension. The sting of his words ignited a fire within her. How had she allowed this voice to echo in her mind for so long? "Maybe I am," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil roiling inside her. He raised an eyebrow, and for a moment, she felt the weight of doubt bearing down on her again. But then she glanced at the mirror, the promise of transformation shimmering in its depths. "Watch me," she added, her determination hardening like steel, before turning away, ready to shape her destiny with each step. The journey ahead loomed daunting yet thrilling. She could practically taste the metamorphosis on the horizon. As Sarah walked away, a firm resolve began to crystallize within her. She would confront every part of herself, ready or not. The question now lingered: how would she piece together the reflections that awaited her, and what would emerge from this? Confrontation with her past? Each layer peeled away would nurture a deeper understanding, but could she endure the exposure? The path unwound before her, and with it, the whisper of change tantalized her spirit, beckoning to be explored. What lay beneath the mirror's surface awaited. Would she embrace the reflections, or would they shatter her newfound clarity? As Sarah walked away from the auction house, her heart pounded with a mix of exhilaration and fear. The mirror she clutched was more than an ornate object. It felt like a portal, a bridge to the parts of herself she had long avoided. Each step on the pavement resonated with a litany of questions. What would she really see when she looked into that reflective surface? What truths lay buried beneath the catalog of self-doubt? She sidestepped the crowds, entering a nearby cafe to gather her thoughts. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. Finding a quiet corner, she propped the mirror by her side, its ornate frame glinting under the muted light. She took a sip of her drink, still too distracted to savor the taste. Her reflection in the window, juxtaposed against the mirror, revealed the battle within. The confident facade she often projected seemed fragile. Would she always be the person who let others dictate her self-worth? The memory of her critics' dismissive tone lingered. Did you really think you could win that and change your life? Haunted her thoughts. She hadn't realized how much weight those words carried until now. What if he was right? What if transforming her life was an impossible dream? But then she remembered the powerful moment at the auction. That surge of defiance as she made her bid felt like awakening a suppressed potential. Every rejection she had faced now etched itself into her mind like a grimoire of lessons learned. Jotting down her thoughts in a notebook she always carried, Sarah found solace in stringing her emotions into words. Each idea turned into a commitment, a promise to herself to excavate the layers she had so carefully constructed. She dipped her pen into self-reflection. Why had she been so afraid of confrontation? Unpacking her past, she pinpointed moments when she had chosen comfort over challenge, gathering her truth like pebbles in a jar. The mirror would help her confront it all, urging her to unpack those histories instead of burying them deeper. But what if those revelations would hurt more than offer comfort? The idea made her uneasy. Yet she also recognized an undeniable truth: growth often demanded discomfort. By the time she stepped back onto the busy street, she had created a plan of action. She would start small, reflecting on her daily experiences and emotions, capturing the nuances that formed the mosaic of her life. Sarah imagined herself facing the mirror each morning, a ceremony of sorts, where she would allow herself to be vulnerable, to acknowledge both triumphs and failures. As she rounded the corner onto her street, her pulse quickened again, not from fear, but from anticipation. She felt like an artist reviving a long-forgotten canvas, ready to blend colors of joy and sorrow to express a more authentic version of herself. After everything she had conquered, she owed it to herself to transform self-doubt into self-acceptance. The town skyline twinkled against the evening sky, and Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the windows of the buildings, fleeting yet poignant reminders of the journey she was embarking on. However, as she approached her apartment building, a nagging thought crept into her mind, unsettling her newfound resolve. What if, amid this exploration, she uncovered truths that she wasn't ready to confront? What aspects of herself would clash as she delved deeper? With the mirror finally in her grasp, Sarah realized her path was no longer just about personal growth. It was about accountability to herself and the people who had proven to be doubts rather than supporters. The stakes were high. Would she emerge whole, or would she be shattered by the realities forced into the light? She stood at her door, wondering, was she ready to begin peeling back those layers? The first reflection awaited, and it was time to confront what had been hidden for too long. Would it empower her or paralyze her with fear? With a deep breath, she entered her home, the mirror still cradled in her arms, an emblem of both courage and uncertainty. In that moment, she understood that each reflection would prompt a choice: to face fears or to run once more. The ultimate conflict loomed. The next step would be pivotal, laying the foundation for who she would become. The soft click of the door shutting behind her echoed in the small apartment, creating a momentary solitude that felt both suffocating and liberating. Sarah set the mirror down on the small kitchen table, the light glinting off its ornate frame, inviting yet intimidating. She hesitated, unsure of how to approach the first reflection. Sitting down, she took a deep breath, seeking clarity amidst the whirlwind of thoughts. The memory of her critics' words lingered, a shadowy presence that dared her to falter. But she also recalled her own voice, the self-affirmation she had felt when she claimed that mirror at the auction. There was strength in vulnerability, and it was time to acknowledge that strength. She opened her notebook, the pages filled with the raw chaos of her thoughts and emotions. A sense of order emerged as she reviewed her scattered ideas. It was more than just a chronicle of her inner turmoil, it was a map of her potential pathways. With her pen, she began to formulate a plan. Each line she wrote felt like a step toward unraveling the tight knot of doubt she had carried for so long. Identify the fears, she scribbled, underlining it with conviction. Names, faces, moments she needed to confront them all. As she listed her main fears, failure, judgment, and confrontation, she felt both the weight of their significance and the urge to diminish their power. She acknowledged her past avoidance, but flipped the narrative. It was not merely about avoidance. It was a journey toward discovery. With each fear unwrapped, she could almost feel the tightness in her chest ease. This didn't mean they vanished. It meant she was starting to own them, to reshape them into stepping stones rather than boulders blocking her path. Sarah took hold of this growing sense of capability, pen moving faster as ideas flowed. On another page, she began to sketch out scenarios where she might face these fears directly. What would happen if she stood up to her critic? What if she shared her ambitions with others, not in living rooms or coffee shops, but in spaces where ideas flourished? Suddenly, she was imagining herself engaging in discussions, linking arms with those who supported her, and dismantling the cage of self-doubt. Yet, as excitement bubbled within her, a flicker of doubt surfaced again. What if the confrontation didn't turn out the way she hoped? What if the critics only multiplied? The thought threatened to halt her momentum, but as she stared into the mirror, something shifted within. Instead of seeing her fear, she saw a woman brimming with tenacity. Each surface flaw on the mirror reflected the life she had lived, but the brilliance of her spirit began to gleam through. That night, Sarah sat at the table with the mirror propped in front of her, ready for her first self-confrontation. Could she embark on this journey with the same fearless attitude she had displayed at the auction? She leaned forward, her heart racing as she breathed out a steady mantra. I am worthy of my dreams. I refuse to be defined by fear. She closed her eyes for a moment, envisioning her future a tapestry of success woven with resilience, threads of her past failures transformed into rich colors of experience. The reflection before her transformed no longer merely glass, but a window into her potential. But as dawn approached, with sunlight filtering through the window, a chill ran down Sarah's spine. Ignoring the negative voices was one thing, confronting them face to face was another. What would happen when she engaged with her critic? The question loomed large and ominous, challenging her resolve. Tomorrow would mark the first act of her self-defined transformation, where she would reveal the true Sarah, not the reflection others dictated, but the one she sought to nurture. But deep down, Sarah knew that tearing down barriers could unleash a flood of vulnerabilities she'd long kept hidden. Would she stand strong, or would she drown in the very truths she sought to uncover? Tomorrow held the potential for confrontation, and despite her resolute desire for growth, Sarah felt the heart-stopping edge of doubt hover near. Would she summon the courage to face not only her fears, but the truth that could redefine her path forward? The moment of reckoning was drawing closer, and she could feel the stakes amplifying. The sun rose over Sarah's apartment, casting sharp beams through the window and illuminating the space where self-discovery loomed. It felt like the universe was nudging her forward, a gentle insistence that today was the day everything could change. Clenching her notebook, she sat at the table again, the mirror now a silent companion, reflecting her resolve back at her. Step 1. Find your voice, she repeated to herself, grounding her focus. Those words echoed as if they were incantations meant to dispel the fog of insecurity that had clouded her for years. Today, she would take a giant leap beyond the protective bubble she had cultivated, a bubble that whispered safety but was filled with stifling silence. She pulled out her phone and opened a chat window for the local writers group she had hesitated to join for months. The opportunity was a microcosm of her fears, as she fought the urge to type something witty or profound, ultimately hitting send on a simple message. Hi, I'd love to join this weekend S meeting. Each digit felt like a tremor amplifying her heart rate, sending adrenaline surging through her veins as she anticipated the response. As the morning stretched on, Sarah worked through different confrontational scenarios, her fingers flying across the page as she wrestled with each potential outcome. She practiced what she might say to her critic, rehearsing in front of the mirror, her reflection evolving from uncertainty to determination. You can judge me, but you don't define my worth. I am more than your perception. The way words poured out felt electrifying, like she was peeling off layers of protective armor to reveal softer, yet powerful, pieces of herself. Yet beneath the electricity lay anticipation, mixed with dread. Standing in those spaces where thoughts coalesced into meaningful expressions was daunting. The thought of sharing her dreams with others ignited excitement and fear in equal measure. Would they see her as an imposter, or would they welcome her? What if they turned their backs on the truth she dared to share? Instinctively, her gaze shifted back to the mirror, the surface now embodying her evolving spirit. The cracked edges seemed to frame not just her image, but her scars, each a reflection of battles fought silently. Achievements blurred alongside past failures, creating a mosaic of resilience. Today, I choose courage, she whispered to herself, the words pooling in her chest with a warmth she yearned to kindle further. She made a quick list of her goals for the writing group, contribute ideas, share a piece of her writing, and most importantly, actively engage with constructive feedback. The tasks felt monumental, yet she grasped the pen as if it were a compass guiding her toward authenticity. As the hours dwindled before the meeting, she dressed with intention, a simple outfit tailored to evoke confidence, yet comfortable enough to allow her to breathe. Each piece of clothing felt like a second skin, a step towards presenting herself as she desired to be seen. On her way to the meeting, Sarah's heartbeat quickened, and thoughts raced through her mind like stars streaking across the night sky. She questioned everything. Was she truly ready? Could she transcend her established identity and forge a new path? The internal dialogue spiraled, self-doubt twisted into a suffocating embrace. Yet, in moments of clarity, she returned to her mantra, I am worthy of my dreams. Arriving at the space, she stood outside the door, feeling the tangible threshold between the safety of her past and the potential of her future. The sounds from within, the laughter, the discussions were inviting yet terrifying. She could retreat now, ducking back into the familiar shadows, or take that vital step forward and embrace the unknown. As Sarah inhaled deeply, her thoughts crystallized with newfound determination. She reached for the handle to open the door, but just before she could turn it, a figure appeared at her side. It was her critic, the very person she had framed in confrontational dialogues all morning. The shock surged within her, propelling a cocktail of anxiety and bravery. In that moment, Sarah was torn between the desire to shrink away and the urge to confront directly what had chained her for so long. Would she sink into the familiar waves of terror, or would she fight against the tide? The answer teased her, just out of reach, as she steadied herself for the ultimate confrontation. The handle felt cold under Sarah's trembling hand, yet the warmth of her resolve surged within her like molten fire. She had practiced her words, her stance, her very presence. Everything had been a rehearsal for this moment. The figure next to her, her critic, stood there waiting, an embodiment of her past fears wrapped in a familiar face. Sarah, the critic said, a hint of surprise mingling with a condescending smile. The veneer of professionalism barely masked the judgment underlying those words. I didn't expect to see you here. An awkward silence hung between them. This was the moment she had rehearsed, yet suddenly the stakes felt insurmountable. With every breath she took, the air felt thicker, laden with unsaid words. Collecting her thoughts, Sarah lifted her chin slightly. She could not allow a mere presence to undermine her courage. Well, she began, steadying her voice with newfound strength, I decided it was time to step out of my comfort zone. The words hung in the air, both a declaration and a challenge. She wished she could see herself through the other's eyes, but all that met her gaze was the sparkle of judgment. Oh, that's brave, the critic replied, sarcasm dripping from each syllable. You must be excited. There it was, the green light of confrontation reflecting in the critic's eyes. Sarah could feel a visceral urge to retreat, but at that moment, she realized she was no longer that silent, fearful girl who had faded into the background. The enormity of her choices flooded back to her. Every rejection, every purposefully avoided confrontation shaped the path she now walked. "Actually, I am excited," Sarah responded, allowing conviction to lace her tone. "And I'm looking forward to sharing my writing." The abrupt confidence in her words startled her. Was this truly her voice echoing back, or simply a fleeting moment of audacity? "Writing? Interesting," the critic replied. "I know how you feel about criticism. You might want to brace yourself." Each word was a barb, but instead of flinching, Sarah felt an odd sense of relief wash over her. The judgment was inevitable. She couldn't allow it to define her anymore. Taking a step closer, she locked her eyes with the critic. "You're right, I'm going to face it, and I won't allow you to make it feel like a threat. I'm proud of my work, and that's not going to change, no matter how harsh the feedback." Her heart thundered wildly, yet the adrenaline surged as empowerment settled in. The critic faltered, eyes widening momentarily, as if Sarah had pressed an unexpected button. For the first time in their history, the power dynamic felt reversed, and it sent a swell of exhilaration rushing through her. "Do you really think you're ready for that?" The critic shot back, less confidence seeping into their voice. "Yes, I do," Sarah replied, her breaths measured and purposeful. "And I've accepted that not everyone will understand or appreciate my voice. But that doesn't diminish its worth." She felt a wave of clarity in her articulation, each breath aligning her with a newfound sense of self. The harshness of the encounter fell away in the face of her own affirmation. As she stepped away from the door, with the critic still fumbling for a retort, she felt light, liberated from chains she had long thought too heavy to break. Turning the doorknob, she stepped through the door into the meeting, the vibrant atmosphere swallowing her apprehensions. Surrounding voices blurred into a tapestry of encouragement, and she felt the pulse of creation thrumming all around her, barely noticing the critic retreating to the shadows behind her. Sarah found her place in the circle as if a missing piece of a puzzle had finally clicked into position. All those fears about being judged, about sharing her truth, began to dissolve as she listened to others share their stories. As a chair scraped and attention shifted toward her, Sarah's heart raced, but this time with excitement rather than dread. It was exhilarating to be seen and to share. She could finally taste the raw power of vulnerability. With a deep breath, Sarah prepared to speak, her mind reaffirming her worth with every beat of her heart. She would not only contribute, she would shine in her authenticity, unbeknownst to her, words that would transform her life, that would lead her to embrace and overcome her deepest doubts, lay waiting at the tip of her tongue. But just as she opened her mouth, a hush fell over the room. Someone in the back raised a hand, a shadowed figure resembling her past, whispering something that echoed the doubts she had fought so fiercely. The decision now hung in the air: would she allow her progress to be silenced by the ghosts of her past, or would she seize this moment to rise above? As Sarah took a deep breath, preparing to share her first words at the writers' group, the shadow of her critic re-emerged, a specter of doubt poised to tighten its grip. The room echoed with the hushed anticipation of her peers, but among them, she felt the weight of that familiar judgment. "You're not a real writer," the statement reverberated in her mind, a refrain that haunted her since childhood. But today, she refused to let such fears distort her narrative any longer. "Actually, I am a writer," she stated with surprising clarity, the room stilling as her voice resonated with conviction. She continued, "And I've spent too long wondering if my words mattered. I'm here to embrace my voice, no matter how imperfect." Empowered by her assertion, she focused on the words before her, confronting the fear that had kept her silent for years. The challenge was not merely to write, but to speak boldly, claiming her space in this room. As she spoke about her reflections, her experiences as a single mother, the treasures she unearthed at auctions, and her journey through self-doubt, Sarah felt a loosening of the chains that bound her. Each sentence shed layers of fear, Each word was rooted in her reality, transforming moments of vulnerability into steadfast assertions. The room, initially a cold arena for self-critique, shifted into a sanctuary where support blossomed with every honest revelation. Applause rippled across the circle as she paused, an unexpected wave of warmth confirming her newfound identity. Her mind hummed with adrenaline. It was no longer a fantasy to be heard, but a palpable experience she could own. The alternate reality of defeat dimmed while the realm of possibility brightened. Sarah glanced around the room, met with nods and appreciative smiles. They saw her. They heard her. And they cared. Weeks passed, and Sarah dedicated herself to her writing, a discipline that slowly reconstructed her confidence. With each meeting, she unwrapped pieces of her perspective, embracing the challenge of criticism and allowing it to refine her craft rather than shatter it. She engaged with her fellow writers, forming a network that nurtured her creativity, a tapestry woven from shared struggles, laughter, and the promise of growth. Then came a moment that felt surreal. She was asked to present her writing at a local literary event. The beginnings of panic clawed at her insides, but the determination she forged through countless confrontations ground fear into mere background noise. "I am worthy of my dreams. I refuse to be defined by fear," she repeated, embracing the mantra that had become her anchor. As she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm against her skin, an overwhelming sense of pride washed over her. This was her moment of triumph, a culmination of her journey. The words she had labored over poured forth, powerful and unapologetic, painting vivid landscapes of her life experiences. The audience hung on her every word, her voice washing over them like a tide, engaging each listener with authenticity and reflection. After the reading, the applause erupted like a storm. Sarah's heart soared. The embrace of recognition felt like a sweet, refreshing rain after the long drought of self-doubt. She stepped off the stage, greeted by encouraging smiles, an array of hands awaiting her. People approached, eager to compliment her bravery, to share how her story had resonated with them, how her journey mirrored theirs. The glow of validation propelled her forward. A manuscript request from the event organizer, a proposal to publish a collection of her stories. These opportunities surged at her like fireworks in the night sky. But it was more than accolades or tangible results. It was the recognition that she had proven herself. She possessed the talent and the tenacity to break free from the confines of self-doubt. Sarah returned home that evening, the reflecting mirror by her side, now a symbol of her journey toward personal empowerment. No longer just a piece depicting her skin, it had morphed into a vessel of her transformation, a reflection of her triumph over fears and a promise to herself to continue growing. Her journey was not simply about confronting others, it had been about stepping into the fullness of her identity, daring to craft a life forged in her authenticity. Standing before the mirror, Sarah smiled, knowing that every refracted light held the promise of her aspirations now realized. She felt the freedom to shape her path, armed not only with words, but with undeniable strength. And thus, an ordinary day morphed into a celebration of self-acceptance and achievement. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to the reflection, her eyes sparkling with confidence. As she embraced the person she had become, the lingering question faded. How will she lead the narrative of her life now? You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your own transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread the message of personal growth. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible journey. We want to hear your thoughts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, and remind them that change is possible with the right perspective. Don't wait even one more second. Show your support and join the community of true fans of personal overcoming stories.